The world is ending right before our very eyes. The government has had their hands around the world's neck for 800 years. But suddenly, everything is changing. It's almost like the world is taking its first breath. Suddenly, the light is turned on. Truth begins to emerge as the darkness fades. And at the center of it all, as you would of course assume, is Monkey D. Luffy. I think it is long past time that the world government acknowledge him and allow him to take his rightful place as the world's most wanted man. Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, maybe there's a point in the story where bounties really don't matter. And if ever we were to reach such a point, Egghead would make a lot of sense. If you couldn't get somebody's head with a bounty of 3 billion or 4 billion, look, you could go exponentially higher. It's not going to make a difference. The people in the story who are actually capable of defeating Luffy and cashing in on the bounty aren't really going to be concerned about money. Defeat Luffy and you are maybe the king of the world. I know we're not there yet, we're jumping the gun a little bit, but you're freaking close. Honestly, just sitting here and thinking about it, I wonder to myself, what is the government going to do? What could they possibly do in order to try to restore the balance? Once Vegapunk's message goes live, you can't undo it, not unless you plan on killing everybody, which in fact might actually be the plan. How many countries do you think are going to turn their backs on the world government because of this? I suppose it might depend on what exactly Vegapunk reveals. All the world government dirt relating to the underworld that Vegapunk and the Revolutionary Army possess? If that gets out, total anarchy. But regardless of Imu, the Gorosei, God's Knights, maybe the admirals and the entirety of the Marines, I think that the government needs more allies. They need them. For 1,000 chapters of this story, the Gorosei have gone on and on about the balance of powers, the necessity of the Shichibukai. The Pacifista were an important component of the world government's forces, and now suddenly they have less authority than Jewelry Bonnie. Maybe the Seraphim can pick up some slack, but a lot of people right now are wondering what exactly Blackbeard is doing here in Egghead. What is he acquiring? And of course, it's many things. He's having a conversation with Caribou about the ancient weapon Poseidon probably soon. But when Katarina Devon touched Saturn, she made it clear that that was their objective all along. Yet that doesn't make any sense. How could they possibly have known that the Gorosei would actually show up to Egghead? So I then just find it logical to assume that by touching Saturn, whatever it was that the Blackbeard Pirates actually came to Egghead for, they can now acquire. Saturn is a key. So what exactly is located within Egghead that by posing as Saturn, they can now steal? And in my mind, that is the Seraphim. All of this just makes way too much sense. We saw Blackbeard just before the Egghead arc, and he was fighting Boa Hancock and the Seraphim. He saw their power firsthand, and seemingly could not do much of anything to them. So Blackbeard wanted the Seraphim, and then sent his subordinates to Egghead. His subordinates, once there, learned of the authority chip, the Gorosei's place in the hierarchy, and now Katarina Devon has touched Saturn. Mission complete. While all of this chaos unfolds, the Blackbeard Pirates can make their play. And the crazy thing about it is, so long as Katarina Devon's powers work the way that we think that it works here, then once they give orders to the Seraphim, the other Gorosei cannot break them. Check freaking mate, dude. This is why it's better to actually have subordinates that are loyal and not forced to be loyal, based on technology that can be co-opted. Or at least have some sort of backup plan like a reset button. Either way, the balance as we know it is totally shattered. I kinda half expect that the government could just offer islands or offer entire countries and king status within their government for some of these top tier's heads. Obviously, we expect Imu to use their weapon again, a weapon that literally erases islands, but that also relied on the Mother Flame and the status of Vegapunk after this. Will Imu have access to this power again? We don't really know, but it certainly feels like they can't erase every island because their power source is limited. Imu even talked about the range of the weapon, so I feel pretty confident that the world government is going to aim to clear out many of these islands without using the weapon, and if so, they're going to need new kings. Islands are for sale. Could you imagine that being printed on a bounty poster? Bounty. Kingdom. Blackbeard Z-ha-ha, that would reach the heavens. But no man, for serious, right? Like the Egghead incident, it is way too big. The things that are happening here, you've got to expect some movement regarding bounty, even if it's just a symbolic gesture. I'm totally aware that Luffy getting an update in his bounty would be totally unprecedented. I mean, we only just got a massive increase at the conclusion of Wano. That was only about 2 years ago, real world time, and that was like a couple days ago, One Piece world time. But that just seems to be how the story is escalating. You guys recall back to like before when Luffy would sit on a bounty for many years. We're talking like 5 years between updates. And that was back in the day with far less breaks. But I think Egghead is going to make it 4 straight arcs. Dressrosa, Whole Cake Island, Wano, and then now. Wrap your head around this. At the conclusion of Dressrosa, Luffy's bounty was 500 million. It's less than 1 month later. Investing in Luffy stocks would have been highly profitable. But speaking of the unprecedented nature of Luffy getting another bounty so quickly, the bounty in Wano itself was kind of unprecedented. So it's kind of the season to do things differently. But what I'm talking about here is that in every prior arc, or every time that Luffy got a bounty update, he defeated somebody. And no matter what, unless that person didn't have a bounty at all, Luffy would exceed the person that he's defeated's bounty. And then in Wano, Luffy defeated Kaido, who had a 4.6 billion berry bounty, and somehow he only deserved 3 billion. The conspiracy theorist within me wants to blame the world government for being Luffy haters. That's really the only explanation. I actually didn't have a problem with Law and Kid earning 3 billion berry bounties. Is it a little higher than I thought? Maybe so. They teamed up to defeat Big Mom, but Big Mom was an established Yonko for more than one generation, right? That is impressive. Clearly, these pirates are up and coming. They are threats. But Law and Kid having the same bounty as Luffy, I don't know about that. Technicalities aside, Luffy defeated Kaido alone, and Law and Kid teamed up to defeat Big Mom, so they should be roughly half. Honestly, if you can tell, I was kind of confused about some aspects of the bounties that were given out in Wano. But again, now that we're here in Egghead and we see what's unfolding here, it's really starting to make sense to me. Of what Oda was actually trying to accomplish. I think that Oda ran into this problem. He knew what he was going to do in Egghead at the conclusion of Wano already. He knew that this event was going to require a bounty update for Luffy, but Luffy had just defeated Kaido a Yonko, which also required the same. So if Oda sets the bounty too high in Wano, it diminishes the impact of the new bounty in Egghead when the world might actually break. So for the first time ever, Oda lowballed it, probably with some internal logic about the government actively trying to suppress Luffy's notoriety. But yeah, for me, it's no coincidence that following the conclusion of Wano, Luffy has the same bounty as Kid and Law. They're perceived, they're sold as rivals, as equals, and immediately both Law and Kid go down to other Yonkos while Luffy is here in Egghead changing the world. The One Piece will be found soon, and the actual players for them are making their moves. So Shanks and Blackbeard mattered as well, and you can consider Kid and Law to have been sacrificial fodder for the greater good. But yeah, I guess it's finally time to actually talk about bounties following the conclusion of Egghead. And really, there's two ways that I want to take this. One is what I want, my opinion about what should happen, and then second, what I actually think is going to happen. You'll understand in just a moment. So to be straight up with you guys, I just think, just quite honestly, right now, Luffy should already be the world's most wanted man. He should already be that. He is the single most dangerous individual in the entire world, and the Gorosei and Imu, the world government should know that. Maybe we should talk about Dragon. He is known as the world's worst criminal, also translated as the most wanted man. He probably possesses the highest bounty in the series, at least currently. So why is that? I think it's because he fights directly against the world government. The world government is his enemy, and for most of the story, he was their greatest threat. This is very different than the prior objectives of pirates such as Big Mom and Kaido. Kaido, who worked directly with the world government. Big Mom, who seemed very content to live in her own little pirate paradise and mind her own business for the most part in the New World. Ambitious, strong, and cruel, yes. But in my mind, the essence of a bounty is really the danger that you pose to the world government. Are you guys ready for a take that has probably a pretty strong likelihood to age poorly? I'm not really sure that Dragon is stronger than Big Mom or Kaido. I don't think so. I mean, I could put Dragon on the same level. That could make sense to me. Stronger, I don't really see it at this point. Blackbeard is a cautious guy by nature. He didn't mess with any of the other Yonko. But when Dragon suddenly landed on the market, Blackbeard pressed buy. Take this however you want to. So the difference in my mind between Dragon and Big Mom and Kaido is just really what their goals are and how likely they are to accomplish them. In my mind, it is the same logic which justifies Kaido having a higher bounty than Big Mom, who has a higher bounty than Shanks. At least for right now. Before Shanks set out for the One Piece, a lot of people around the world probably believed that Shanks' ambition was not quite as high as the other two. Is he individually as strong, potentially stronger? Yes. But he's having meetings with the Gorosei secretly in order to help maintain the balance. Both Mihawk and Buggy, who know Shanks well, thought he was done. Big Mom, meanwhile, was very much not done. She still had great ambitions, but having been a Yonko and a great pirate for so long without any real change or growth. I just simply believe that the government didn't deem her as much of a threat as Kaido. And that's probably the biggest thing which I think separates Dragon. Imagine for a second that Dragon isn't a revolutionary, but is just a pirate captain. His potential is incredibly high because his ideals can earn him a lot of allies across the world. It's actually kind of interesting that the Revolutionary Army is almost inversely related to the world government. The stronger they become, the weaker the world government comes by proportion. Probably. And we saw this growth in real time. Dragon is still only scratching the surface of the threat he could become. And so I think the same thing is true of Luffy. Luffy is the only one that we know of, aside from the Revolutionary Army and Dragon, who has directly declared war on the world government. In fact, they did it well before they should have, and yet they're still alive, which should be scary by itself. And similar to Dragon, Luffy has the real possibility of making the entire world his allies, because of what he fights for and how he fights for. His fleet is growing bigger after every arc, and this has begun to include entire countries, including the land of Wano, considered one of maybe the two strongest peoples that exist. Mihawk was keenly aware of this even before the time skip, that Luffy possessed the most fearsome ability in the world. But the thing which puts it over the top for me is Luffy as the sun god Nika. For one, we know that prophecies about Nika and about Joy Boy exist, and I'm pretty certain that Imu and the Gorosei have to know about them. In fact, as likely over 800-year-old beings, they might actually have met the prior Joy Boy, and therefore know exactly what they should be afraid of. We also know for a fact that prophecies are a real power that exists in the world of One Piece, and if anybody knows that, it should be Imu and the Gorosei. But like, think about Toki, her prophecy in Wano. That happened. Think about Madame Charlet, ability to gaze into the crystal ball and see visions of the future. That's gonna play out in some form or fashion. Honestly, the scariest thing about Dragon and the Revolutionary Army is the fact that they've been snooping about the secrets of the world government, right? And so at some point they might actually reveal these things to the world. But once they reveal them, the real threat is Nika, because he's probably the person that's gonna put it all together. So anyway, if you consider Bounty to be partly how strong an individual is, but more accurately, their threat level to the world government, I think you can make a pretty compelling argument that Luffy is a greater threat than anyone, including Dragon, already. And this is without bringing up the fact that Luffy has a past with Shanks, and is the reason Shanks lost an arm. I would be very surprised if Imu and the Gorosei do not already know this. Shanks certainly isn't shy about telling people, and Luffy is actually wearing Shanks' hat, which means it is a distinct possibility. Even if it never happens, there's a distinct possibility that Shanks ends up becoming a subordinate of Luffy, or at least an incredibly strong alliance. Imagine for a second, hypothetically, Whitebeard and Shanks teamed up to rescue Ace in Marineford. Those two combined, their pirate crews, their power, they would have just utterly crushed the world government, in my opinion. Where Luffy is now and where he is going with Shanks as an ally, who do you think stops them? It's this kind of worst case scenario that the government should be preparing for. And I mean, hell guys, this gets even scarier because Luffy rescued Crocodile and Buggy from Impel Down. Zoro trained under Mihawk, and this is your 4th Yonko crew in Cross Guild. And oh wait, Luffy's father is Dragon. They have to be blind not to be able to see this. So if Oda just decides to give Luffy a 10 billion berry bounty, only dead or whoever takes Luffy's head becomes a celestial dragon, I wouldn't even argue. That is what I think should be happening. That being said guys, I actually don't think that is what will happen. For as much as we talk about bounties really being a reflection of threat level and not an individual strength, I just don't think that Luffy is quite at something like Shanks' level, or as Goldie Roger and Prime Whitebeard were. I think the fight between the two would be epic, but Luffy eventually loses. I think he can get stronger. By the end of the story, of course, he will not only equal these, he might just become the strongest person in living memory, and he might attain this power pretty soon, but not at the conclusion of Egghead. So probably for the first time ever, I am actually treating bounties as a more direct measure of strength. Adding up everything that has occurred in all of Luffy's accumulated feats, his threat level, plus how I perceive his individual strength right now, I think it would be very fitting for Luffy to have a 5.6 billion berry bounty. The Gomu Gomu joke. Gomu translating as 5-6. This would actually mean that Luffy's bounty rises higher than Gold D. Roger at the time of his death. Honestly, I kind of think that Oda gave Roger a 5.5 billion berry bounty because he always intended to give Luffy a 5.6. Tell me why I'm wrong. And the justification for that is simply that Luffy is Nika. Sure, Roger found the One Piece and was known as the Pirate King, but he was not Nika. So the government knew there was only so much that he could do. I also do believe that this still makes Luffy the most wanted man in the world. But others will be close, and Oda will make sure that he's still got contemporaries. There's more than one player in this game. This brings us back to Shanks. Shanks defeated Kid, a person with a 3 billion berry bounty, easily. I just assume that the world government knows that this occurred. They may not. I assume that they do. Shanks is also rapidly acquiring the poneglyphs and probably can find the One Piece very soon. I think the world government also knows that. Shanks has already traveled with Roger, regardless of whether he stepped foot on Laugh Tale or not. And for that reason, Shanks will get a bounty update to 5.5 billion berries. Essentially, he's of the same level and threat level as Gold Roger. But Dragon is so much more interesting. We actually still do not know what Dragon's actual bounty is. All we know is he's the most wanted man in the world, or otherwise known as the world's worst criminal. Look, I think that there is a legitimate reason why Oda has not already revealed Dragon's bounty and was hyping up Dragon as a criminal in the pre-time skip. I think that he had the highest bounty in the world. Whitebeard was alive in the pre-time skip. His bounty was 5 billion berries. I think that Dragon's was more. My actual guess is somewhere between 5 billion and 5.6 billion. But I actually don't think that his bounty is going to change. Blackbeard, I think, is actually the most interesting character here, and I'm going to do something weird with him. In the past, I really felt like Egghead might be Blackbeard's coming out party. And there is no doubt that he has acquired very important things, some of which the government actually doesn't know about or won't know about, at least for some time, such as Caribou leading to Poseidon, some of which they may actually find out about, like if he takes the Seraphim as an example. His defeat of Law, what happened with Garp. But Blackbeard is a character that likes lurking in the shadows. He is a man of darkness, after all. I don't think that he'll mind one bit if Luffy wants to take the headlines. So while I think that Blackbeard's bounty will grow, I think he'll actually have the lowest of the characters that we've mentioned so far, Dragon, Shanks, and Luffy. To actually put a number to it and be very controversial, I'm gonna guess 4.996 billion berry bounty, which would mean he hasn't yet surpassed Whitebeard. But in my mind, a bounty like this would only be a reflection of how much he is being underestimated, some of which is by design. Honestly guys, even more than Luffy, Blackbeard is the only character that I am absolutely certain gets another bounty increase, following the conclusion of Elbaf. And in my mind, there is absolutely a distinct possibility that Blackbeard becomes the world's most wanted man, even above Luffy. We're just not there yet. But as far as the crew is concerned, I'm not entirely convinced that we're gonna get major bounty updates for them after this arc. It could happen, I could definitely see small updates, but they don't seem to be a focus of this arc. How this is actually most interesting to me is when thinking about Zoro. Remember, Zoro was a supernova, at one point in time considered a contemporary of characters such as Law, Kid, and Luffy. Several times throughout the story, characters have questioned who the actual captain of the Strats should be, but it just seems to me that Zoro might be falling behind. Mihawk, as the world's strongest swordsman, has a 3.6 billion berry bounty. I expect Zoro will eventually eclipse that. I actually think that Rayleigh, as the second command of Gold D. Roger, probably also possessed a bounty between 3 and 4 billion, which is in line to where the other supernova have landed, Kid and Law at 3 billion. I don't expect them to grow much past that. So end of story, I could easily see Zoro possessing a 4 billion berry bounty, possibly higher, and ultimately end up as the supernova with the second highest bounty. All this being said, right, he needs the feats and he needs the accomplishments to actually have deserved this in some way. All I know for sure is that I am entirely convinced that Zoro will not possess a 1.111 billion berry bounty when he fights against Mihawk. So he has quite a lot of ground to make up. Quite honestly, I would be disappointed if Oda threw Zoro a bone following the conclusion of Egghead and gave him something like a 1.5 billion berry bounty. If so, I would just have to believe that it's more so a reflection of Luffy as his captain than actually what he has done in the arc. I just don't see Lucci as a tougher opponent than King, sorry. That might also prove to be an L take. I guess we'll see. And of course, it obviously matters what happens here with the Gorosei. Zoro can change my mind. In fact, I encourage it. Please change my mind. But long story short, my headcanon is that maybe Elbaf will actually feature the Straw Hat crew a little bit more predominantly than Luffy himself. We can all admit, right, that Egghead has been very Luffy-centric, even more than is usual. A big component of this arc is Nika. The world is discovering that Luffy is a god. So once again, to break convention, I believe it is possible for the first time ever, Elbaf is the arc where the entire crew gets bounty updates, but not Luffy. So I suppose we'll see about that. Either way, I could really see Zoro possessing a bounty much closer to 3 billion at the conclusion of that that arc. But anyway, guys, I don't normally make bounty videos, but with what's happening right now in Egghead, it's actually got me excited. This entire arc has been a colossal W for Luffy. I don't know exactly how it will happen, but I 100% believe Big News Morgans is somewhere around Egghead in his hot air balloon way above. He snapped himself a picture of giant Luffy with Kizaru in one hand and Saturn in the other. So as people often say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. But anyway, I am curious as to what you think. Whether you agree or disagree, let me know in the comment section below. Remember to check out my book, The Booms, link in the description. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.